Second Lady Karen Pence. I see Elizabeth Dole right there. We have several spouses of our distinguished cabinet members here with us today. And of course, we're also honored to have many spouses from our nation's selfless military families. On behalf of everyone at the American Red Cross, thank you all for supporting the brave men and women in the military. They sacrifice so very much to keep us all safe. Before we begin today's events, I wanted to quickly share an overview of the American Red Cross and also speak about the impact that the work we're going to be doing here will have on military members as they're deployed overseas. They say that 1 in 5 people in our country have been touched by the American Red Cross in some way, but it's unusual to meet anybody that really knows everything that we do. Most people know we respond to disasters, but what most people don't know is we actually respond to 64,000 disasters every year. That's 1 every 8 minutes. And these range from home fires to hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, and floods. We also provide about 40% of the nation's blood supply. We teach about 5 million people every year life-saving classes. And these include things like swimming, lifeguarding, babysitting, first aid, and CPR. And of course, we support military service members, veterans, and their families. We're congressionally chartered, but we're not a government agency. So everything that we do is because of the generosity of volunteers, blood donors, and financial donors. And we could not be more grateful. A key part of what we do is support the military, their families, and our veterans. And in fact, during our last fiscal year, we provided more than 460,000 emergency connections and communications to members of our military and their families. And this could be anything like delivering news of a tragedy at home to a member who is deployed overseas, or something joyous like helping bring a husband home to witness the birth of his first child. And we have volunteers on all the military bases all around the world, including in theater, like in Afghanistan. And we have volunteers in all the VA hospitals as well. So today, you're going to be helping military members by assembling comfort kits. They're going to be distributed in places like Iraq, Kuwait, Djibouti, and Poland. And these kits provide personal items, snacks, and a personal note of thanks. And with your work this morning, you're joining a group, a real legacy at the American Red Cross. The first time we sent comfort kits overseas was in World War I in 1917, and the tradition will continue today. On a very personal note, I am the daughter of a World War II veteran. I am the wife of a Vietnam vet, and I'm the proud stepmom of an active duty master sergeant in the Air Force. And we just learned last week that he is about to be deployed. My stepson missed 2 Christmases back to back because he was deployed twice, 2 different times in Iraq. And he told me that getting cards and comfort items from strangers meant the world to him, because it meant that he had the support of the folks back home during the holidays. So the work we're going to be doing here is very important. So I want to thank you all once again for sharing your time with us today and for your commitment to the nation's military men and women, our veterans and their families. And now it's my great honor to introduce a remarkable woman who is a friend of the American Red Cross and a wonderful advocate for America's military families. Second Lady Karen Pence is a dedicated wife and mother, an educator, and an award-winning artist. Before becoming the First Lady of Indiana in 2013, Mrs. Pence spent 25 years in the classroom as an elementary school teacher. Her commitment to the well-being of young people and their families is evident in everything that she does, especially when it comes to raising awareness about the importance of art therapy. Mrs. Pence is also a champion of military members and their families, and in particular, she's committed to educating military spouses about the resources and the opportunities that are available to them and to their families. Mrs. Pence is such a compassionate and creative woman, and she has truly a caring heart. So I would ask all of you to please join me in giving her a warm Red Cross welcome to the second lady of the year.
Good morning. Thank you, Gail, for that kind introduction. I commend you on your leadership and your great service to our nation. A lot of those facts were new to me. I don't know if they were to the rest of you, but they were pretty amazing. It's such a pleasure to be here at the American Red Cross and in the beautiful Hall of Service. I'm looking forward to helping to assemble comfort kits for service members deployed overseas during the holiday season. And I believe that today's service project will mean more than we will ever know to the brave men and women who will be away from their families this Christmas. And I'm a Blue Star mom, so it means a lot to me as well. Thank you to the spouses of President Trump's cabinet and the spouses of military service members and veterans for being with us today to pack the kits. We appreciate you all so much. It's so fun to partner with the cabinet spouses today. And I am so honored to be here with our wonderful First Lady, Melania Trump. Melania's compassion and dedication to our nation, and especially our nation's children, deserve great recognition. She has visited hospitals and schools across the United States. She has raised awareness about the dangers of opioid abuse, specifically the effects the drug has on infants and unborn babies. And the First Lady is shining the light on the well-being of children through her campaign, Be Best. Melania, and I learned this the very first time I met her, she has a natural gift of being kind and loving to others. She exudes kindness every time I see her or speak with her. It was evident when we traveled to Texas together last December as part of our continuing efforts to assist those affected by the hurricane. Melania wanted to shine a spotlight on those who needed assistance to rebuild. She also wanted to encourage Americans to lend their time by volunteering or providing financial support to all of those still reeling from the hurricanes. She wanted to make this trip during the holiday season, and she asked me to join her, and I was honored to go along and help. But she went further when we were there. I wish you could have been there with us when we visited a family whose home was really half standing there with no roof. Half the walls were gone. She took the children inside the house. She said, "Tell me where your room was. Where was your bed?" She had them tell her all about their house and talk about some of the good memories. So I'm honored this holiday season to be here with Melania at the Red Cross to put together care packages for American troops currently deployed this holiday season. Please join me in welcoming the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump.
Thank you, Karen, for a beautiful introduction and for inviting me to join you this morning. Good morning. Today's tragic news out of Afghanistan only drives home the need to support the men and women in our military and their families. We lift up the families affected by this terrible loss. Our continued prayers remain with all our troops as we come together this morning to support our armed forces. I'm honored to be here today to participate in such a sincere opportunity for us to honor and thank our troops. Thank you to Gail McGovern and the American Red Cross for all that they do to support and care for people around the world. Thank you to Elizabeth Dole and many of our wonderful cabinet spouses who are here to help in this important effort. And to Kobe Langley for his service to this country and all he does to support our armed forces. It is great to be with all of you today. As many of you may have seen, the President and I unveiled the Christmas decorations at the White House yesterday and held the first of many holiday receptions to thank volunteers. This is such a wonderful time of year, and we are honored to open the People's House to the public so that families from all over the country can join the decorations. As we begin this Christmas season, which traditionally means spending time with loved ones, I believe we should also take time to remember all that we are thankful for as a nation. I'm very thankful for the men and women in uniform who sacrifice daily to protect not only the American people, but our freedoms and way of life. Our prayers remain with all those serving overseas and for the families who wait for them to come home. To the mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, brothers, and sisters who will be away from home as they answer duty's call, we thank you for your service. These comfort kits are one small way that we can say thank you and honor the sacrifices that members of the military make year-round. And I encourage people everywhere to consider participating in acts of service, such as volunteering during this holiday season. Thank you all so much for having me here today. Merry Christmas, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Trumps, Mrs. Pence, Gail, and the cabinet spouses. So on behalf of the military personnel receiving these kits, I want to say thank you. I speak from experience as a combat veteran myself receiving these items, as I mentioned before. It will be greatly and deeply appreciated. It's fitting that we gather in this historic building dedicated to the memory of the historic women of World War I. This facility has been the site of many events supporting our brave men and women servicing in our armed forces, from wrapping bandages to building these comfort kits, and we continue this legacy today. So when we finish building these kits, they'll be packed and shipped to our 4 deployed locations in Djibouti, Iraq, Kuwait, and a new location in Poland. I'd ask everybody to please take your positions at the tables. Those of you that are closest to the stage, please go ahead and take a bag and place one item in the bag. You're then going to pass it to the person to your left. And then when the completed kit reaches the end of the table, there's going to be somebody at the end of the table that will assist you in combining the 2 kits and ready for shipping. Once again, thank you. Let's get started.
Hello everyone, we're live in the newsroom here at Fox 5 DC. So happy to have you on the stream today. We're live in Washington, and thanks for joining us on the live chat and talking about the stream right now. You're looking at a live look inside the Red Cross headquarters here in Washington. Let's pull this up full screen one more time. Melania Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, and some other officials are there to help make these comfort assist kits for the military when we come into the holiday season. So that's what you're looking at here, a live look there. We are going to show you a couple other top stories from today, this Tuesday, November 27th. Coming up shortly, we'll let this kind of roll out for a second and then bring you all of the live events that are happening that we're getting in to our newsroom today on our live stream, on our video. So stay tuned with us today. We also have very special, the White House press briefing is back. It will be on camera today at around 1 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll be bringing that to you from inside the White House, which is newly decorated today. The White House decorations went up and the Christmas trees are all decorated. There's lots of reaction from that going across the internet, so we'll show you some of that as well.
All over the continent. Would you comment on that?
Truth be told, I think Africa has been neglected by, more than this administration, it's been an area that we haven't focused on really very much, except in the counterterrorism domain since really since the Cold War ended. But it's certainly an area where China, for instance, is investing very heavily. I think there's something like 2 million Chinese now living on the African continent, working on various Chinese industrial projects that are meant, obviously, to spread Chinese influence in the region. So I think it's an area that we neglect, at our peril, but it is not, I think, right now anyway, one that requires a military response to. And I would just, if I could, Senator, join Admiral Roughead in thanking you for your service on this committee. I think this is the 10th time I've testified before the committee. I think you've almost always been here. So thank you very much for your service to the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I would add to that, because it's not just this committee, but Senator Nelson and I have been on 2 major committees for a long period of time, and his contribution has always been very great. I appreciate it very much. Did you have anything further?
No, sir.
I do have, at the very beginning of this, and we can make this kind of quick, I asked a couple of questions I was hoping that would be responded during the course of other people's questions, one having to do with using the word of the disequal. I said I've never used it before, but I enjoyed reading it. Between China and Russia's nuclear modernization, as opposed to our aging nuclear fleet, and the fact that we've been doing nothing while they have been. Granted, we started out way ahead, but where are we now, and how would you respond to what they're doing in that nuclear area?
Senator, so if you look at both China and Russia, they've both been engaged in pretty vigorous nuclear modernization programs over the last decade. If you look at the Russians, they're building a new road mobile ICBM, they're building a new heavy ICBM, they are testing a rail mobile ICBM, although it's not clear whether they will ultimately deploy it. And they have been developing concepts in their literature for use of low-yield theater nuclear weapons that could be very troublesome if they were actually put into effect. So that's on the Russian side. On the Chinese side, you see a very big qualitative improvement. They're developing MIRVs and MARVs, and that numerical buildup is not quite as visible, but it is ongoing. And so we have 2 nuclear adversaries with much more modern nuclear arsenals than we do. And at least one of them exploring concepts that could be very dangerous in a time of crisis, because it might actually lead to someone deciding that they could use some of these weapons in a way that would be below the threshold that would necessitate a U.S. response.
And this is the area that your report holds out as the #1 issue that we're dealing with, too.
Right, and so I think our judgment was that the commitment of the current administration, which actually builds on the previous administration's commitment to modernize our nuclear triad, is worth sustaining, and that the findings of the Nuclear Posture Review struck us as reasonable answers to all of those problems.
Yeah, I would also add, Senator, that the work that China is doing in hypersonics, what type of weapons will be on those vehicles, that poses problems as far as they're no longer on this very easily determined point of origin of where it came from. Where did it come from? The offensive systems that are optimized against ballistic missiles, those have to be relooked. And again, this adds to that growing to-do list, if you will. And these are hard technical problems that will require resources. And so, it's a significantly challenging area, and we have kind of taken our eyes off the ball of nuclear policy, nuclear deterrence, creating a group of future thinkers that will be able to deal with it, because it's not going to go away. I think all of us would like to put the genie back in the bottle, but it's not happening.
Well, one thing, and I'd like to ask this for the record, because it'd be I'd like to have you give more thought to it, and that is to list the areas, and I listed a few of them in my opening statement, or I guess in my first questions, where China and or Russia is actually ahead of us or catching up with us. If you could do that just for the record, I'd like to. It'd be very helpful for me to have the benefit of that.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, just one point here. I shared the trip with Senator Nelson to Afghanistan, and it's one of the many kindnesses and examples of leadership and friendship that he extended to me through a long time. So thanks, Bill. Good being with you. Thank you for getting us back home, Admiral. And one point we've had a discussion back and forth about Social Security, et cetera. The Commissioner was very clear about not looking at the entire federal budget for ways in which we could deal with this resource issue, including taxes as well as. And I think that should be noted, and I commend the Commission. Thank you, Mr.
Yes, sir, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
You know, one thing, we could actually, we've got some.
That was extraordinary. But one of my other regrets is we want to reiterate.
Take a look here at these aerials of this 4-alarm fire at a Dallas apartment complex. This was a smaller fire earlier. It escalated this morning to 4-alarm, and we've read that 3 firefighters were removed from the scene, and medics did treat them on the scene. They're okay so far as what we hear. But again, this is an apartment complex. Right now, no word on what actually caused this fire. But it could be seen from miles away as crews work to get under control this morning. So the cause is still unknown. It is developing. When we have more details, we'll bring them to you. But again, this was called in 2 alarms and then sort of escalated to a 4-alarm fire this morning. This is in Dallas, Texas. We're going to keep you updated on this.
General Motors announcing big cuts Monday. The automotive company says they'll be laying off roughly 14,700 employees and ending production at plants in North America, including 2 factories in Ohio and Detroit.
This came as a complete surprise to me. When I heard it on the news, it was not the way you want to hear about losing your job.
Slow car sales and a shift in focus to SUVs and trucks are being blamed for the sweeping slash. The company is also restructuring to produce autonomous vehicles.
Based on the consumer shift toward crossovers, SUVs, and trucks, market conditions require that 5 North American assembly and propulsion plants will be unallocated product by the end of 2019.
President Trump, who has made bringing back auto jobs a major part of his appeal to people in Ohio and Michigan, expressing his dissatisfaction, specifically commenting on the plant closure in the Buckeye State.
This country's done a lot for General Motors. You better get back in there soon.
15% of GM's North American workforce expected to be cut. A portion could be moved to truck or SUV factories. Some will receive buyouts, others laid off.
The reality is this is just a corporation, a greedy corporation trying to make more money off of the backs of employees.
Some affected plants could resume production, but that depends on contract negotiations with the United Auto Workers Union. In Washington, Ray Bogan, Fox News.
The legal battle between Facebook and British authorities reaching a new level on Monday. The social media giant desperately trying to block the release of seized internal documents, allegedly proving CEO Mark Zuckerberg knew about Facebook decisions on data mining and violating user privacy. The documents were taken by Parliament from a Facebook third-party app developer who was on a business trip to London, part of a broader European effort to combat hate speech and misinformation on social media.
We have to do more in terms of cooperation between countries and with private actors, but the devastating effects of what is happening are there.
Damon Collins, head of the parliamentary committee investigating Facebook, says the seizure puts lawmakers in uncharted territory, but hasn't yet committed to releasing the documents. Tweeting in part, quote, under UK law and parliamentary privilege, we can publish papers if we choose to as part of our inquiry. And there's a lot at stake. Facebook has lost more than $100 billion in value since the Cambridge Analytica data scandal back in March. And experts say if the company is not held accountable, it could lead to even more violations.
Certainly when you have things like social networks or places, online stores, they tend to work more effectively when they have more user data. So what naturally happens is that you end up with one company dominating the field.
On Tuesday, British lawmakers are holding an international hearing now to stop disinformation on social media. Mark Zuckerberg was invited. He decided not to attend. In London, Greg Palcott, Fox News.
Now, there is some time to diffuse this, but government funding runs out on December 7th, and this immigration crisis could push things to the brink. After a violent weekend, migrants that have amassed along the U.S.-Mexico border are considering their options, having been turned back once. And the president is seizing on the crisis, blaming Democrats.
Democrats have become the party of caravans and crime.
Appearing at 2 political rallies in Mississippi yesterday for a Senate race, the president again and again brought up the border. His supporters pushing for a border wall, and the president is leading the charge, saying Congress should fund the wall. And that insistence could lead to a government shutdown in about a week and a half, as Democrats blame the White House.
I think that what this does is just further puts people into their corners, into their partisan corners. And look, it's hard enough to get things done on Capitol Hill. And when you see these images, when it's blanketing TV waves, it just makes things that much harder to get done.
But that's not the only thing that could signal a shutdown. Democrats may insist on a provision to protect special counsel Robert Mueller and the ongoing Russia probe.
Democrats will push to include it on the must-pass spending bill that we must approve in the next few weeks.
But plenty of Republicans and Democrats in Congress would like to see this resolved without a break in funding.
You know, life is hard, but it's harder when you're stupid. And it would be stupid to shut government down. We ought to be able to work these things out.
Now, it's always possible that Congress could pass a stopgap bill to buy some extra time here, but no one seems to be in the mood right now for compromise. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
Paris is burning. Deadly protests continue after the French government imposed a new carbon tax. France is planning to spend about $15.2 billion by 2022 to develop its transportation infrastructure. Back in the U.S., 13 federal agencies here in Washington rolled out a serious warning about the environmental and economic threat of climate change for the United States. President Trump isn't sold.
I don't believe it. You're going to have China and Japan and all of Asia and all of these other countries, you know, addresses our country. Right now, we're at the cleanest we've ever been.
The 1,600-page report's findings include temperatures in the U.S. are 1.8 degrees higher than 100 years ago. Seas are 9 inches higher. Heat waves, hurricanes, and wildfires are more severe. Climate change could cut GDP by 10% by 2100 if there are no changes.
Reasonable people can differ about how much and how rapidly. But I think it's clear that it's changing, and it's clear that humans are a contributing factor.
You're going to see devastation to our crops. You're already seeing the hurricanes because of the ocean warming, and you're certainly seeing in vivid color those horrible wildfires out west.
As for those devastating wildfires, some California lawmakers say hotter, drier weather has been a key factor.
Climate change is a very real part of this problem, no doubt about it. But also, it is the management. The forests have not been properly managed for the last 70 years.
Utah Senator Mike Lee says he hasn't seen an effective solution.
All the proposals I've seen so far that would address any of these issues would devastate the U.S. economy and have little or no benefit.
Critics are using this as an opportunity to go after President Trump for withdrawing from the 2015 Paris Climate Accord championed by his predecessor. The White House notes the development of this report began under President Obama, and says the next one will provide more transparent and data-driven information. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
Thank you, Mississippi. It is great to be here.
Cindy Hyde-Smith is getting some high-profile help for Tuesday's election.
Now, this Senate seat is for a very, very special woman who's going to do a special job, and she votes for us, and she votes for Make America Great Again.
The president, vice president, and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham are all trying to make her the victor, painting her as a strong conservative.
When Kavanaugh needed your senator, she was there. We're going to start over in 2019.
Mississippi is a Republican stronghold. President Trump won the state by 18 points in 2016, but the race is tight after a 2014 photo surfaced of Hyde-Smith wearing a Confederate hat, and after she made controversial remarks some consider racially charged. The comments prompted Walmart, Major League Baseball, and other companies to ask Hyde-Smith for their donations back.
And her comments don't reflect the value of our state.
Her challenger, Mike Espy, has also criticized her comments, but he has his own problems. He was indicted on charges of accepting improper gifts as Bill Clinton's agriculture secretary. Espy won that case. A campaign ad also claims Espy lied about being a foreign agent for the Ivory Coast. Espy is trying to keep the focus on health care and education.
I want to lift everybody up, and that's all I've been talking about.
Win or lose, Republicans will maintain a majority in the Senate after the election, but keeping this seat will be important for confirming judges and cabinet positions, including a new attorney general. In Washington, Ray Bogan, Fox News.
There were several of us. At any given time, I'd have to say there were about 6 of us female firefighters pregnant at the same time.
Call it a baby boom at the Phoenix Fire Department.
The guy that took my spot ended up with twins. And then the guy on C shift in my spot, he had twins. And then the captain on C shift, he had a boy. So that was just all the babies at our station.
The group of friends who all work as Phoenix firefighters thought it would be a cute idea to get a pic of all their babies together. They hired birth photographer Alana Penrod with Wild Bird Photography to snap the photo.
Everyone was having such a fun time. All the parents were kind of, trying to dangle keys or clap at their babies and get them to look at me. And so I was making noises, and we ended up getting some good shots of all the babies kind of looking one way. And
here's the final picture. Little did anyone know the attention it would receive, being shared thousands of times on social media.
It was definitely got a lot of attention real fast.
The parents say it's a wonderful memento to have, and Penrod says she's just glad she could capture the special moment.
It's really nice to see that it's like such a well-liked photograph. It's nice to have that work pay off. So.
Ty Brennan, Fox 10 News.
Here at Quail Creek Ranch, they tell us Christmas trees are harder to come by this year and more expensive. And it's a problem that's only expected to get worse. This field should be covered in young new trees, but it isn't.
You'll see that it has no roots. They've all died from the fact that it's been so dry.
The same sad story.
This would have been a row.
Tree after tree. There just hasn't been enough water lately for David Roy's Christmas trees to survive.
Usually we have about a 95% survival rate. So now it's the opposite.
He and his wife have been in the business for decades, and he says this year's been the worst. They planted 9,000 trees in the spring. Roy tells us maybe only a couple hundred survived.
It's just the cost. Every year we've got to replant the same tree and not get anything out of it.
They're nervous for the long term, while the short term is already proving tough.
The market this year is very tight.
Roy tells us supply is low, demand is still high, and prices have skyrocketed in the last 5 years. The trees they do have are going fast, snagged by lucky customers who noticed it was slim pickings and got one while they could.
It was a little sparse on the size that we wanted.
We usually cut one down, and we found most of the big trees are already cut.
Plus, the Roys tell us they can't sell all their trees. Since they can't count on the young ones, they have to save some of the good ones in case of another dry growing season. Because they can't meet the demand, they'll be closing early this year. They say next weekend is the last chance to come out here. At Quail Creek Ranch, Audrey Wheel, Fox 12 Oregon.
Russia once again finding itself in a military standoff involving Ukraine. It started on Sunday when the Russian Coast Guard opened fire on 3 Ukrainian naval ships near Crimea. The ships and their crew were seized by the Russian Navy, claiming the Ukrainians violated their territory. But the Ukrainian government called it a routine passage and says the attack could be an act of war.
The Russian claims about violation of the Russian border by the Ukrainian naval ships is an outright lie.
What Kiev has been doing in coordination with the U.S. and others to promote a conflict line against Russia is fraught with very dangerous consequences.
Martial law will go into effect on Friday in parts of Ukraine as the country's president is warning of an imminent ground invasion from Russia. President Trump says he's monitoring the situation and coordinating with European allies.
We don't like what's happening, and hopefully it'll get straightened out. I know Europe is not, they are not thrilled. They're working on it too.
The new crisis comes just days ahead of a planned meeting between President Trump and Russian President Putin at the G20 summit. President Trump has made repairing relations with Moscow a top priority, but some lawmakers and security experts are urging a tough response to what they say is another Russian provocation.
We need at this upcoming G20 summit for the president, I believe, to deliver a strong message of rebuke to Putin. And then I think we need to consider increased military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine.
A Russian court has ordered at least one of those sailors to be held in custody for the next 2 months. In Jerusalem, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
The cheering never stops for this crew. One by one, these special children make their way off the bus and into this magical toy store. Thousands of toys on shelves for the taking. It's a colorful, music-filled room with dancing and fun. Each child filling carts with games, electronics, and gifts for others. Since 1994, the Omeyer Foundation has provided an all-expense-paid adventure to Orlando for children battling cancer. Now that Toys R Us is out of business, the toy store shopping spree almost didn't happen.
All of these former Toys R Us employees came together to be part of this event and help check out the kids as they make their purchases.
Toy companies donated everything you see in this room.
Like toy heaven.
The children here, aged 4 to 19, are all in different stages of their cancer fight. Cammie Marks just came out of surgery last week.
It makes me feel so special and included.
Something the founders of this family-run organization have aimed to do since losing their 10-year-old to leukemia 24 years ago.
What we're doing here is giving them energy. We're infusing them with life and energy to go and take on whatever it is that's coming ahead.
And bringing more joy to the journey. In Orlando, Amanda McKenzie, Fox 35 News.
No justice, no peace. Several dozen protesters expressing their anger and demanding answers Monday over the fatal mall shooting that left E.J. Bradford Jr. dead. The group marched from Hoover, Alabama City Hall through the streets and into the River Chase Galleria where the shooting took place. At one point, they blocked one of the busiest streets and made their voices heard. Say his name! EJ! Say his name! EJ! Hoover police fatally shot 21-year-old Bradford when they responded to a fight-turned-shooting on Thanksgiving night. Cops thought Bradford was the suspect, but turns out it was a case of mistaken identity. Authorities have since said Bradford was not the shooter, but say he did have a gun in his hands.
We want to make sure that the people who killed, murdered EJ in cold blood are held accountable.
Hoover Mayor Frank Bricado publicly offered his condolences Monday and promising to establish the truth.
We will be transparent throughout the course of this investigation.
He also asked the community to remain patient as state authorities investigate the incident. Protesters are calling for a boycott on the mall and a real apology to Bradford's family. Mayor Bricado has asked for a face-to-face meeting. Police body camera footage and other video has been turned over to the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, and that agency will determine when the footage will be released. In Los Angeles, Robert Gray, Fox News.
We've, during certain times, as you know, closed the border. They're not coming into the United States. They will not be coming into our country.
Leaving the White House for campaign events in Mississippi, President Trump today weighed in on yesterday's confrontation at the San Ysidro border crossing. The president insisting Border Patrol agents had no choice but to use tear gas, even though women and children were among those trying to storm the border.
They had to use because they were being rushed by some very tough people, and they used tear gas. And here's the bottom line. Nobody's coming into our country unless they come in legally.
Earlier today, President Trump threatened to effectively shut down cross-border commerce between the U.S. and Mexico, in a tweet saying Mexico should move the flag-waving migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, back to their countries. They are not coming into the USA. We will close the border permanently if need be. Congress, fund the wall. Democrats, already highly critical of the president's move to put troops on the border, didn't like the scenes from yesterday one bit.
There's a better way to handle this. The United States has caused, the Trump policies has caused the anxiety at the border.
But President Trump got full-throated support from South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who tweeted, "I support President Trump's decision to close the border until we can get a handle on the chaos created by the broken laws governing asylum. We must have money for border security/wall and must change asylum laws." Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, who President Trump is thinking about replacing, defended yesterday's border closure in a pointed statement saying DHS will not tolerate this type of lawlessness and will not hesitate to shut down ports of entry for security and public safety reasons.
The most tumultuous order of all was this summer's separation of children from their parents.
Both DHS and the president also took aim at a 60 Minutes report last night about the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, which resulted in hundreds of migrant children being separated from their parents earlier this year.
I never thought that they would separate him from me.
A DHS spokeswoman called the segment flawed reporting, which displayed disregard for the truth and a fundamental misunderstanding of our nation's immigration system. President Trump again pointed out his administration is not the only one to have separated children from their parents when they crossed the border illegally.
Obama had a separation policy, but people don't like to talk about that.
In shutting down the San Ysidro crossing and threatening to close the border altogether, President Trump is signaling to Mexico that he's not afraid to affect cross-border commerce between the United States and Mexico to get action on immigration. But the people he really needs to convince are Democrats down the street on Capitol Hill, and for the moment, they appear unmoved. At the White House, John Roberts, Fox News.
The NASA team breaks out in cheers and applause after its latest project made a successful and nerve-wracking journey to Mars. It's called the InSight Lander. The device traveled a whopping 300 million miles through space for 7 months to reach the red planet. Scientists say the final descent was not a guarantee, having to go from more than 12,000 miles an hour to zero in just 6.5 minutes. But the InSight Lander touched down with no significant problems.
Touchdown confirmed.
Some photos were quickly sent back, speckled with dust particles on the lens. More images are expected in the coming days. The spacecraft will study Martian geology, burrowing deep beneath the surface, literally mining for information.
Mars was a habitable planet about 3 billion years ago, and then something happened, and now it is desolate. And we're trying to understand what caused that to happen.
The findings could also explain more about Earth, like how rocky planets are formed.
And understanding the composition of a planet is critically important to understanding the habitability of a planet.
The project will last about 2 years. Solar panels will be used to keep the machine running. The landing was broadcast live on the NASDAQ stock market tower in New York's Times Square, where several NASA scientists rang the closing bell. Anna Eliopoulos, Fox News.
Snowplows out in force as wicked weather grips the Midwest. At O'Hare Airport here in Chicago, workers spent Monday trying to keep the runways open, but hundreds of flights were still grounded, leaving passengers going nowhere fast.
Very aggravated. I can't get out of here. I've been bumped twice. I can't even rent a car.
The storm began this weekend, halting holiday travel on one of the busiest days of the year. Snowfall in Chicago tapered off in the early afternoon, but the residual effects left some Thanksgiving travelers still trying to get home. People like Doug Barr say it is what it is.
It's just the weather. There's nothing we can't do about it. The good Lord says they're going to blow it in, they're going to blow it in. So we have to just wait and see.
The roads are not much better in Nebraska. They're covered in slick, dangerous ice, causing accidents across the region.
Another car was actually spinning out towards me. He managed to avoid me, but then I spun out.
Slippery, sliding all over the place.
Kansas also buried, prompting the governor to declare a state of emergency this weekend. The storm is now pushing toward the Great Lakes, eventually heading into western Pennsylvania and New York State. Tonight, temperatures are expected to plunge, meaning untreated snow and slush will freeze into slick ice. In Chicago, Mike Tobin, Fox News.
I still have about 75 tents out here.
Lonnie Allen is one of the volunteers at this makeshift evacuee campsite in the parking lot of this Chico Walmart.
We do an hourly check to make sure that people are okay and not freezing.
Even with the cold and rainfall, volunteers say the few evacuees left here are sticking it out.
They want to go home. They want to go home and see what they have left.
High winds are also causing concerns for crews still working to recover human remains.
Once the winds were getting up into the area of 25 or 30 miles an hour, we had lots of trees coming down.
He says teams are working to cut down trees deemed hazardous.
We do have teams of fallers going out there, and they're dropping the P1 trees, dropping the P2 trees as they can if it's maybe in an area where they're trying to search and they can safely fall that tree.
While crews are working through the rain and wind, volunteers back at the makeshift camp are trying to help evacuees.
And it's got a heater in it, it's got everything. They sleep inside of here instead of getting cold.
Many who chose to stay, even after many donations were removed.
I'm going to stay either in my tent or the car if I get it.
Despite the rain, volunteers like Alan say people are sticking it out to stay close to the place they once called home.
And I understand that some of them still have family, that hasn't been found up there, and that's what they're afraid to leave for.
Inside the Fort Harriman Middle School principal's home, you'll find a winter wonderland, and hours of painstaking work go into creating this Christmas display. Everywhere you look in this family room, time ticks with old world German charm. In a house that's gone cuckoo for Christmas.
We wanted to really catch the essence.
Rodney Shaw pays homage to the holiday's German roots on this tree. He's got 13 others to show you around his home.
This is the gingerbread candy theme tree, snowman tree, a real cool 1940s, 50s theme type tree.
And these are just the trees. At the front of his house, the entire living room turns into a Christmas town.
Slowly over 20 years, it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger.
Look closely and you'll find fun details in the appropriately named Snow Village. The theater is playing a classic you might recognize. Lights blink at the diner. It's open for business. Kids sled down a hill. A fireman saves a cat from a tree. While the train whizzes by, the scene captures Shaw's own childhood nostalgia from watching his aunt decorate for Christmas.
She had a little village, and I would just sit all the time when I was little and just stare and, make believe I was there, and that was my house and my town. And so I just fell in love with Christmas.
Now he shares that love and Christmas cheer with family, friends, and his school.
It makes me feel happy.
He hopes others who visit feel that happiness and holiday magic.
While the Christmas Village is pretty much as big as it can get, Rodney says he does plan to switch up the theme of the trees, meaning that he'll be creating a few new collections in the next few years. In Riverton, Lauren Steinbrecher, Fox 13 News, Utah.
If you'll remember, defense was cut over the Obama years about 20% in real terms.
The outgoing Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee is warning America, beware of drastic cuts to the defense budget now that the Democrats have taken the House.
What we also saw was an alarming increase in accident rates across the board. What I worry about is slipping backwards and losing the progress that we have begun to make.
Congressman Mac Thornberry says Democrats want to cut missile defense and cut building 2 new low-yield nuclear weapons. The leading Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, set to take over as chairman, Adam Smith, vowed prior to the election in November he wants to cut the $716 billion defense budget.
I think the number's too high, and it's certainly not going to be there in the future.
Smith joked Republicans always try to scare people.
Every threat we ever hear about, we're not ready, we're hopelessly outgunned, outmanned, it's all falling apart, we're all going to die, basically. All part of an effort to get us to spend a massive amount of money on any one of 1,000 different things.
A new report from the Washington think tank CSIS, however, warns that 2 decades after 9/11, the number of Sunni Islamists operating around the world, now estimated at 230,000, has quadrupled despite 17 years of war.
We're at near peak levels in the number of jihadist fighters.
And a new bipartisan report by the National Defense Strategy Commission concluded for the
first time since the end of the Cold War, the United States is at risk of losing a future war against Russia or China. The reason? Budget instability.
President Trump has told the Pentagon and every other agency to cut 5% of their budget amidst skyrocketing deficits, just when the Pentagon was finally fixing years of neglect that had strained the force and its equipment. At the Pentagon, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
Hundreds of people marched through central Alabama, furious over the police killing of Emantic Fitzgerald Bradford Jr., a shooting suspect who officials now admit was innocent. It started with an altercation at a local mall on Thanksgiving night. 2 people were shot and injured, a 12 and an 18-year-old. An off-duty officer working mall security thought Bradford was the gunman and fired, killing him. Police say the 21-year-old may have been involved in the initial argument and did have a gun on him, but he was not the shooter. Activists call Hoover police murderers who rushed to judgment because of Bradford's skin color.
Woke up and shoot an innocent black man. Found out later the gun was never even shot. Never even shot. Never shot. But yet he's dead.
Attorney Benjamin Crump represents the Bradford family. He cites several witnesses who say the security officer never issued any verbal commands before firing.
He saw a black man with a gun, and he made his determination that he must be a criminal.
You see somebody, you didn't see no gun waving, as you said, and you shot my son in the head. You let my son bleed out.
Police now believe at least 2 other people were involved in the initial fight. One of them is likely the actual gunman and is still at large. Hoover police are conducting an internal investigation. The officer who shot Bradford has been placed on administrative leave. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
The teens say they were just driving by when they saw the fire coming from this 3-family apartment building, and they didn't hesitate to just run inside and get everyone out. They spent their Thanksgiving sorting through what little remains of their Worcester apartments, but these 2 moms are still grateful. Late Wednesday night, they had no idea their apartments on Hamilton Street were quickly filling with smoke, and flames had engulfed the back of the building.
I would be dead. I would be dead. There's no doubt about it.
But thankfully, a group of junior ROTC members from North High School were driving by.
I was wondering, I was like, is that a fire? And Abdel, we passed the house a little bit, and Abdel looked back, he said, oh yeah, that's a fire. So I was like, yeah, pull over, pull over.
Another man also ran to help, and all 5 of them didn't hesitate to run in.
I knocked a couple times on the second door, no one was answering, so we started kicking down the second door.
When we went in, you could start to smell this fire and stuff, and we were coughing a lot, but we kind of just like try to push that aside.
Cormier says at first she had no idea what was happening.
5 men are in my bedroom just screaming at me. I was like about to get my baseball bat and like what's going on? And it finally made sense. They're saying, there's a fire in your house. You need to leave. You need to get out.
Everyone made it out safely. And since then, neighbors, co-workers, and friends have all come forward to help.
It's easier if you lose some things, but this is our home. Everything that we worked hard this year for, presents we put away.
But they all will be able to celebrate the holidays with their families.
I had the best Thanksgiving ever. Ever. Because my kids were all there with me, my cats were alive. It was the best Thanksgiving I've ever had.
Despite all the damage, Worcester firefighters were able to put out the fire pretty quickly, so it's not necessarily a complete loss. The tenants say that the fire started in the attic and it was caused by electrical problems. Reporting in Worcester, Alicia Rodriguez, Boston 25 News.
Decked out in formal attire. Friends, family, complete strangers rally around an Osceola County teenager battling cancer.
And we were told that if we did the surgery that it would leave him brain dead.
13-year-old Nate Kimbrough is battling stage 4 brain cancer. The community put together this homecoming dance for him.
He just needed someone to be by his side, and he is like a very strong fighter. So I knew that I would be able to help him throughout his journey.
Cadence Redmond met Nate through a group where she volunteers. They hit it off immediately, knew they'd go to homecoming together.
Cadence made a poster and asked if Nate wanted to be his date, and he said yes.
Osceola County deputies and firefighters organized a procession, took Nate and his date to homecoming. The community invited to attend, dance the night away, and give Nate a night to remember.
We want it to be just a real homecoming, like where the kids dress up like they went to homecoming, where they go and they have fun, and it's not cancer tonight.
This homecoming dance put on just like you would see at a high school, complete with refreshments and photo shoots. The big difference, the cash this one brings in, helps cover the cost of Nate's treatment.
He's an amazing person, and that we really need to help find a doctor, and that we just need everybody to pray for him and give him hope.
If we don't find a chemo that works soon, then we don't know what's going to happen.
The family celebrated the holidays early, so Nate could be there. This night, they sent him to his first high school dance a couple years early to give him something to enjoy and show him he's not in the fight alone.
It's not just him. It's not just me. It's not just my immediate family. It takes everybody.
If she's tired,
we started yesterday, right after Thanksgiving. We got out all the ads.
She's not showing it.
We went to a Target at 5 o'clock, got our goods, came back to the house, had dessert.
A shopping marathon that began Thursday.
Actually, like that one a little bit. Yeah, called it a night at midnight, came back, woke up at 5:15.
Is still going strong Friday afternoon for Madison Day. Her latest stop, Kendra Scott at the corners of Brookfield.
Those are pretty.
The store manager here says despite the growth of online retailers, Black Friday at the brick and mortars is alive and well.
It's been fun. We definitely were quite busy. Starting around 9 o'clock, we had a line out the door.
Crowds continued into the evening, where a few stores down, Maddie Baldwin is taking a break.
Just to sit down feels good.
Recharging for the bargain hunt.
And we haven't been here long, but I'm sure I'll find something on the sales rack.
Soraya Hill?
Don't know when we're going home.
Taking it all in for the first time with relatives.
We're just out having a good time. Shop till you drop.
Shoppers say, yes, the deals are great, but what brings them out is experiencing this with family.
Now, like, letting that tradition carry on, and it's just something that we like to do.
They're not done yet.
Tomorrow we wake up we want to leave at 6:15. So we're going to Chicago, going to the outlet mall, see what deals we can get to extend beyond today.
With more than a month to Christmas, plenty of shopping days remain. So we've made it to the holiday season. Now time is ticking until Christmas. The shops here at the corners of Brookfield will be open till Christmas Eve. In Brookfield, Ben Handelman, Fox 6 News.
the Black Friday for us.
Black Friday at the SPCA of Brevard looks like this. No crowds or elbows flying, but instead, people adopting furry family members for less.
The $22, but we didn't adopt two, we only adopted one.
Angelica Hall saying her husband wanted this cat.
She kind of just picked him.
Susan Naylor with SPCA hoping Black Friday specials will get more of these dogs and cats adopted.
We have dogs that are over 6 months. It doesn't matter what size they are, what their look is. They're all going to be $22. And we're also running a special currently for cats, 2 for $22. That includes kittens, adult cats.
Adult dogs and kittens are usually $80 and cats $60. The selection this year bigger than usual because of storms.
Between Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael, we took in 107 dogs and cats.
Which can be challenging.
Bringing in animals like that, it does tax our employees and our space, so it does take a lot of extra time.
But made easier with help from the community.
You can do your shopping online, so instead of going to a big crowded store, why not come to a shelter and find a new family member?
With a name that symbolizes strength, Athena Morisco says one word floored her.
And it took me by surprise. I was training for a marathon at the time.
Leukemia. It was May of 2012. The battle to get well would take much longer.
We try to keep very positive, try to keep very hopeful about everything, and it was kind of just taking it, one step at a time.
Athena says the hardships were made a little easier thanks to her doctor, Mikhail Sekaris of the Cleveland Clinic. But the one thing she wanted as she became healthy seemed out of reach.
I always joke, gee, you should name the baby after me. No one has ever taken me up on that.
Except the one patient he never made the joke with.
Hi, Henry. Hello. Hi, handsome.
Henry Thomas Mikhail Zagata, the 4-month-old, a point of pride for his namesake.
There was this overwhelming sense of responsibility all of a sudden that I really had to live up to something to earn this baby having his name the same as mine.
A doctor turned friend, now woven into the fabric of this family, who continues to give thanks.
It's definitely a life that my spouse and I are very grateful for, and we definitely are sure to give thanks every day for it. We don't take any days for granted, and we really feel that we've lucked out.
In Middleburg Heights, Maya Belai, Fox 8 News.
Some say it was an act of faith. Others say the mission was reckless. John Allen Chow, a 26-year-old missionary and self-described adventurer, killed earlier this week while trying to convert a remote tribe on an island in the Indian Ocean to Christianity. The tribe, known as the Sentinelese, are well known for violently resisting all contact by outsiders, and experts are saying Chow ignored what he must have known was a very significant risk.
They are throwing bows and they are throwing spears. He may get killed. And yet he decided to take his boat there and go just in front of them.
Notes left behind by Chow show he did know the tribe reacts violently to outsiders, but he believed God would protect him, a belief reinforced by his first contact on the island, a small boy who shot an arrow into a Bible he was carrying. The fishermen Chow hired to take him to the island, as well as several others, are now under arrest and could face charges of accomplice to murder.
We apprehended these 7 people who supported John Allen Chow, actively facilitated him.
Now local officials are working on a plan to recover the body, but that won't be easy. Visits to the island are severely restricted, in part because the tribe has absolutely no resistance to any modern diseases.
We should respect their freedom, we should respect their rights, we should respect their life also.
The Chow family has released a statement saying they forgive the tribesmen for killing Chow and that he only had love for the Sentinelese people. In Milan, Amy Kellogg, Fox News.
We shouldn't have anything less. What about if it's divided over a couple of years? The $5 billion is firm?
I think what's firm is a commitment to get money that will secure the border this year. That's substantial, far more than $1.5 million. I'm not negotiating for the president. I'm just telling you where he's at. And he is pretty well dug in on the idea that now's the time to appropriate meaningful dollars to secure a border that is compromised.
Even if that means a shutdown?
Did you discuss this flare-up between Russia and Ukraine with the president? What would you like to see him do when he talks to Putin next week?
He was talking to Pompeo when I talked to him, and I really didn't. We talked mostly about this and sentencing reform. The president really weighed in heavily on a sentencing reform bill. I've never been more optimistic than right now that we can get a large vote on the Senate floor if we take the vote on a prison sentencing reform package. And we talked about how do you end the year? What's the right answer in terms of securing our border? Hopefully the Democrats will see this problem and meet him more than halfway.
Senator Schumer said Republicans and Democrats agreed on $1.6 billion for border security. Did you agree to that, and do you think the president?
No, that's not going to happen. If you're not looking at I tell Senator Schumer, the world has changed dramatically in the last week or two. He's not going to take 1.6. Now, if you don't see a need to substantially secure the border, given all the threats we face, then you're not seeing the same movie that I'm seeing. So that's a non-starter. Ain't going to happen. And I think most Americans would like to have a more secure border. That's not too much to ask in face of all the problems we see on the border.
And he is willing to shut down the government?
You'll have to talk to him about that. If I were him, I sure as hell wouldn't take $1.6 billion.
And did you talk to him about Saudi in advance of the briefing tomorrow?
Yay.
was cool.
Be sure to get that picture from Donna.
Oh.
13-year-old Jace wears a lot of hats, both literally and figuratively speaking. He's the CEO, designer, production manager, packer, and shipper of a company he and his family run from their Gilbert home called Random Hats of Kindness.
We wear hats every single day, and we really want to spread kindness, so we thought, what better way to put kind messages on hats?
Jace and his brother Lincoln come up with the concepts, designs, and slogans.
We buy a whole bunch of blank hats, and then we send the artwork off to a manufacturer, and he stitches them on.
Their stepfather coordinates with different manufacturers and handles the financial transactions.
It's not really about money for me. It's about them experiencing and learning things that they don't learn in school. What do you think?
I like it a lot. That was really good.
During their first year in business, they sold about 250 hats. Each cost around $20 each. The boys sell their hats online and set up shops at different local events. In addition to spreading kindness, the young entrepreneurs put their money where their heart is.
10% of all the profits we get goes to an anti-bullying campaign. Right now we're partnering up with nobully.org, and we're trying to do something really cool with them.
For more information on Random Hats of Kindness and how you can place an order, go to our website at fox10phoenix.com. Nicole Garcia, Fox 10 News.
General Motors announcing big cuts Monday. The automotive company says they'll be laying off roughly 14,700 employees and ending production at plants in North America, including 2 factories in Ohio and Detroit.
This came as a complete surprise to me. When I heard it on the news, it was not the way you want to hear about losing your job.
Slow car sales and a shift in focus to SUVs and trucks are being blamed for the sweeping slash. The company is also restructuring to produce autonomous vehicles.
Based on the consumer shift toward crossovers, SUVs, and trucks, market conditions require that 5 North American assembly and propulsion plants will be unallocated product by the end of 2019.
President Trump, who has made bringing back auto jobs a major part of his appeal to people in Ohio and Michigan, expressing his dissatisfaction, specifically commenting on the plant closure in the Buckeye State.
This country's done a lot for General Motors. You better get back in there soon.
15% of GM's North American workforce expected to be cut. A portion could be moved to truck or SUV factories. Some will receive buyouts, others laid off.
The reality is this is just a corporation, a greedy corporation, trying to make more money off of the backs of employees.
Some affected plants could resume production, but that depends on contract negotiations with the United Auto Workers Union. In Washington, Ray Bogan, Fox News.
The legal battle between Facebook and British authorities reaching a new level on Monday. The social media giant desperately trying to block the release of seized internal documents, allegedly proving CEO Mark Zuckerberg knew about Facebook decisions on data mining and violating user privacy. The documents were taken by Parliament from a Facebook third-party app developer who was on a business trip to London, part of a broader European effort to combat hate speech and misinformation on social media.
We have to do more in terms of cooperation between countries and with private actors, but the devastating effects of what is happening are there.
Damon Collins, head of the parliamentary committee investigating Facebook, says the seizure puts lawmakers in uncharted territory, but hasn't yet committed to releasing the documents. Tweeting, in part, quote, under UK law and parliamentary privilege, we can publish papers if we choose to as part of our inquiry. And there's a lot at stake. Facebook has lost more than $100 billion in value since the Cambridge Analytica data scandal back in March. And experts say if the company is not held accountable, it could lead to even more violations.
Certainly when you have things like social networks or places, online stores, they tend to work more effectively when they have more user data. So what naturally happens is that you end up with one company dominating the field.
On Tuesday, British lawmakers are holding an international hearing now to stop disinformation on social media. Mark Zuckerberg was invited. He decided not to attend. In London, Greg Palcott, Fox News.
Now, there is some time to defuse this, but government funding runs out on December 7th, and this immigration crisis could push things to the brink. After a violent weekend, migrants that have amassed along the U.S.-Mexico border are considering their options, having been turned back once. And the president is seizing on the crisis, blaming Democrats.
Democrats have become the party of caravans and crime.
Appearing at 2 political rallies in Mississippi yesterday for a Senate race, the president again and again brought up the border. His supporters pushing for a border wall, and the president is leading the charge, saying Congress should fund the wall. And that insistence could lead to a government shutdown in about a week and a half, as Democrats blame the White House.
I think that what this does is just further puts people into their corners, into their partisan corners. And look, it's hard enough to get things done on Capitol Hill. And when you see these images, when it's blanketing TV waves, it just makes things that much harder to get done.
But that's not the only thing that could signal a shutdown. Democrats may insist on a provision to protect special counsel Robert Mueller and the ongoing Russia probe.
Democrats will push to include it on the must-pass spending bill that we must approve in the next few weeks.
But plenty of Republicans and Democrats in Congress would like to see this resolved without a break in funding.
You know, life is hard, but it's harder when you're stupid. And it would be stupid to shut government down. We ought to be able to work these things out.
Now, it's always possible that Congress could pass a stopgap bill to buy some extra time here, but no one seems to be in the mood right now for compromise. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
Paris is burning. Deadly protests continue after the French government imposed a new carbon tax. France is planning to spend about $15.2 billion by 2022 to develop its transportation infrastructure. Back in the U.S., 13 federal agencies here in Washington rolled out a serious warning about the environmental and economic threat of climate change for the United States. President Trump isn't sold.
I don't believe it. You're going to have China and Japan and all of Asia and all of these other countries, you know, addresses our country. Right now, we're at the cleanest we've ever been.
The 1,600-page report's findings include temperatures in the U.S. are 1.8 degrees higher than 100 years ago. Seas are 9 inches higher. Heat waves, hurricanes, and wildfires are more severe. Climate change could cut GDP by 10% by 2100 if there are no changes.
Reasonable people can differ about how much and how rapidly. But I think it's clear that it's changing, and it's clear that humans are a contributing factor.
You're going to see devastation to our crops. You're already seeing the hurricanes because of the ocean warming, and you're certainly seeing in vivid color those horrible wildfires out west.
As for those devastating wildfires, some California lawmakers say hotter, drier weather has been a key factor.
Climate change is a very real part of this problem, no doubt about it. But also, it is the management. The forests have not been properly managed for the last 70 years.
Utah Senator Mike Lee says he hasn't seen an effective solution.
All the proposals I've seen so far that would address any of these issues would devastate the U.S. economy and have little or no benefit.
Critics are using this as an opportunity to go after President Trump for withdrawing from the 2015 Paris Climate Accord championed by his predecessor. The White House notes the development of this report began under President Obama, and says the next one will provide more transparent and data-driven information. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
Thank you, Mississippi. It is great to be here.
Cindy Hyde-Smith is getting some high-profile help for Tuesday's election.
Now, this Senate seat is for a very, very special woman who's going to do a special job, and she votes for us, and she votes for Make America Great Again.
The president, vice president, and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham are all trying to make her the victor, painting her as a strong conservative.
When Kavanaugh needed your senator, she was there. We're going to start over in 2019.
Mississippi is a Republican stronghold. President Trump won the state by 18 points in 2016, but the race is tight after a 2014 photo surfaced of Hyde-Smith wearing a Confederate hat, and after she made controversial remarks some consider racially charged. The The comments prompted Walmart, Major League Baseball, and other companies to ask Hyde-Smith for their donations back.
And her comments don't reflect the value of our state.
Her challenger, Mike Espy, has also criticized her comments, but he has his own problems. He was indicted on charges of accepting improper gifts as Bill Clinton's agriculture secretary. Espy won that case. A campaign ad also claims Espy lied about being a foreign agent for the Ivory Coast. Espy is trying to keep the focus on health care and education.
I want to lift everybody up, and that's all I've been talking about.
Win or lose, Republicans will maintain a majority in the Senate after the election, but keeping this seat will be important for confirming judges and cabinet positions, including a new attorney general. In Washington, Ray Bogan, Fox News.
There were several of us. At any given time, I'd have to say there were about 6 of us, female firefighters, pregnant at the same time.
Call it a baby boom at the Phoenix Fire Department.
The guy that took my spot ended up with twins. And then the guy on C shift in my spot, he had twins. And then the captain on C shift, he had a boy. So that was just all the babies at our station.
The group of friends who all work as Phoenix firefighters thought it would be a cute idea to get a pic of all their babies together. They hired birth photographer Alana Penrod with Wild Bird Photography to snap the photo.
Everyone was having such a fun time. All the parents were kind of, trying to dangle keys or clap at their babies and get them to look at me. And so I was making noises, and we ended up getting some good shots of all the babies kind of looking one way. And
here's the final picture. Little did anyone know the attention it would receive, being shared thousands of times on social media.
It was definitely got a lot of attention real fast.
The parents say it's a wonderful memento to have, and Penrod says she's just glad she could capture the special moment.
Just really nice to see that it's like such a well-liked photograph. It's nice to have that work pay off. So.
Ty Brennan, Fox 10 News.
Here at Quail Creek Ranch, they tell us Christmas trees are harder to come by this year and more expensive. And it's a problem that's only expected to get worse. This field should be covered in young new trees, but it isn't.
You'll see that it has no roots. They've all died from the fact that it's been so dry.
The same sad story.
This would have been a row.
Tree after tree. There just hasn't been enough water lately for David Roy's Christmas trees to survive.
Usually we have about a 95% survival rate. So now it's the opposite.
He and his wife have been in the business for decades, and he says this year's been the worst. They planted 9,000 trees in the spring. Roy tells us maybe only a couple hundred survived.
It's just the cost. Every year we've got to replant the same tree and not get anything out of it.
They're nervous for the long term, while the short term is already proving tough.
The market this year is very tight.
Roy tells us supply is low, demand is still high, and prices have skyrocketed in the last 5 years. The trees they do have are going fast, snagged by lucky customers who noticed it was slim pickings and got one while they could.
It was a little sparse on the size that we wanted.
We usually cut one down, and we found most of the big trees are already cut.
Plus, the Roys tell us they can't sell all their trees. Since they can't count on the young ones, they have to save some of the good ones in case of another dry growing season. Because they can't meet the demand, they'll be closing early this year. They say next weekend is the last chance to come out here. At Quail Creek Ranch, Audrey Wheel, Fox 12 Oregon.
Russia once again finding itself in a military standoff involving Ukraine. It started on Sunday when the Russian Coast Guard opened fire on 3 Ukrainian naval ships near Crimea. The ships and their crew were seized by the Russian Navy, claiming the Ukrainians violated their territory. But the Ukrainian government called it a routine passage and says the attack could be an act of war.
The Russian claims about violation of the Russian border by the Ukrainian naval ships is an outright lie.
What Kiev has been doing in coordination with the U.S. and others to promote a conflict line against Russia is fraught with very dangerous consequences.
Martial law will go into effect on Friday in parts of Ukraine as the country's president is warning of an imminent ground invasion from Russia. President Trump says he's monitoring the situation and coordinating with European allies.
We don't like what's happening, and hopefully it'll get straightened out. I know Europe is not, they are not thrilled. They're working in order to.
The new crisis comes just days ahead of a planned meeting between President Trump and Russian President Putin at the G20 summit. President Trump has made repairing relations with Moscow a top priority, but some lawmakers and security experts are urging a tough response to what they say is another Russian provocation.
We need at this upcoming G20 summit for the president, I believe, to deliver a strong message of rebuke to Putin. And then I think we need to consider increased military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine.
A Russian court has ordered at least one of those sailors to be held in custody for the next 2 months. In Jerusalem, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
The cheering never stops for this crew. One by one, these special children make their way off the bus and into this magical toy store. Thousands of toys on shelves for the taking. It's a colorful, music-filled room with dancing and fun. Each child filling carts with games, electronics, and gifts for others. Since 1994, the Omeyer Foundation has provided an all-expense-paid adventure to Orlando for children battling cancer. Now that Toys R Us is out of business, the toy store shopping spree almost didn't happen. All of these former Toys R Us employees came together to be part of this event and help check out the kids as they make their purchases. Toy companies donated everything you see in this room. Like toy heaven. The children here, aged 4 to 19, are all in different stages of their cancer fight. Cammie Marks just came out of surgery last week.
It makes me feel so special and included.
Something the founders of this family-run organization have aimed to do since losing their 10-year-old to leukemia 24 years ago.
What we're doing here is giving them energy, we're infusing them with life and energy to go and take on whatever it is that's coming ahead.
And bringing more joy to the journey. In Orlando, Amanda McKenzie, Fox 35 News.
No justice, no peace.
Several dozen protesters expressing their anger and demanding answers Monday over the fatal mall shooting that left E.J. Bradford Jr. dead. The group marched from Hoover, Alabama City Hall through the streets and into the River Chase Galleria where the shooting took place. At one point, they blocked one of the busiest streets and made their voices heard.
Say his name! EJ! Say his name! EJ!
Hoover police fatally shot 21-year-old Bradford when they responded to a fight-turned-shooting on Thanksgiving night. Cops thought Bradford was the suspect, but turns out it was a case of mistaken identity. Authorities have since said Bradford was not the shooter, but say he did have a gun in his hands.
We want to make sure that the people who killed, murdered EJ in cold blood are held accountable.
Hoover Mayor Frank Bricado publicly offered his condolences Monday and promising to establish the truth.
We will be transparent throughout the course of this investigation.
He also asked the community to remain patient as state authorities investigate the incident. Protesters are calling for a boycott on the mall and a real apology to Bradford's family. Mayor Bricado has asked for a face-to-face meeting. Police body camera footage and other video has been turned over to the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, and that agency will determine when the footage will be released. In Los Angeles, Robert Gray, Fox News.
We've, during certain times, as you know, closed the border. They're not coming into the United States. They will not be coming into our country.
Leaving the White House for campaign events in Mississippi, President Trump today weighed in on yesterday's confrontation at the San Ysidro border crossing. The president insisting Border Patrol agents had no choice but to use tear gas, even though women and children were among those trying to storm the border.
They had to use because they were being rushed by some very tough people, and they used tear gas. And here's the bottom line. Nobody's coming into our country unless they come in legally.
Earlier today, President Trump threatened to effectively shut down cross-border commerce between the U.S. and Mexico, in a tweet saying Mexico should move the flag-waving migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, back to their countries. They are not coming into the USA. We will close the border permanently if need be. Congress, fund the wall. Democrats, already highly critical of the president's move to put troops on the border, didn't like the scenes from yesterday one bit.
There's a better way to handle this. The United States has caused, the Trump policies has caused the anxiety at the border.
But President Trump got full-throated support from South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who tweeted, "I support President Trump's decision to close the border until we can get a handle on the chaos created by the broken laws governing asylum. We must have money for border security/wall and must change asylum laws." Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, who President Trump is thinking about replacing, defended yesterday's border closure in a pointed statement saying DHS will not tolerate this type of lawlessness and will not hesitate to shut down ports of entry for security and public safety reasons.
The most tumultuous order of all was this summer's separation of children from their parents.
Both DHS and the president also took aim at a 60 Minutes report last night about the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, which resulted in hundreds of migrant children being separated from their parents earlier this year.
I never thought that they would separate him from me.
A DHS spokeswoman called the segment flawed reporting, which displayed disregard for the truth and a fundamental misunderstanding of our nation's immigration system. President Trump again pointed out his administration is not the only one to have separated children from their parents when they crossed the border illegally.
Obama had a separation policy, but people don't like to talk about that.
In shutting down the San Ysidro crossing and threatening to close the border altogether, President Trump is signaling to Mexico that he's not afraid to affect cross-border commerce between the United States and Mexico to get action on immigration. But the people he really needs to convince are Democrats down the street on Capitol Hill, and for the moment, they appear unmoved. At the White House, John Roberts, Fox News.
Right now we have the cuts camera up for you.
All right, and speaking of the White House, we are going to flash it over to the White House press briefing today. We haven't seen one of these on camera for quite some time, but we will go over there just shortly now to bring you that. Sarah Sanders will be leading that with her live updates today. That press briefing slated for 1 o'clock Eastern, which is just about 1 minute from now. So we'll be bringing that to you live when it comes up. Take a look.
Harris, good afternoon to you. First briefing in almost a month, and clearly there's a lot for the press to talk with Sarah Sanders about. It's a full house, standing room only today. Clearly the Mueller investigation is going to be a big part of this because of what Mueller said in a joint status report together with attorneys for Paul Manafort that he has been, according to the Mueller Special Investigator's Office, lying to investigators as part of his cooperation agreement as part of a plea deal. In this joint status report, the Office of Special Counsel saying after signing the plea agreement, Manafort committed federal crimes by lying to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Special Counsel's Office on a variety of subject matters which constitute breaches of the agreement. The Manafort response, he believes he has provided truthful information and does not agree with the government's characterization or that he has breached the agreement. Given the conflict in the parties' positions, there is no reason to delay the sentencing herein, and he asks the courts to set a sentencing date in this matter. Manafort is in jail, but he was awaiting sentencing and was hoping to get some leniency by virtue of his cooperation agreement with the Special Counsel's Office. That all appears to be out the window now, and the president tweeting, quote, "The fake news media builds Bob Mueller up as a saint when in actuality he is the exact opposite. He is doing tremendous damage to our criminal justice system where he is only looking at one side, not the other. Heroes will come of this, and it won't be Mueller and his terrible gang of angry Democrats." At the same time as all of this was going on, the Guardian newspaper out of the UK reported that Manafort met on multiple occasions with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, most recently as March of 2016, just before Manafort joined the Trump campaign. However, both WikiLeaks and people close to Manafort are denying this. In a tweet, WikiLeaks saying, "Remember this day when the Guardian permitted a serial fabricator to totally destroy the paper's reputation? WikiLeaks is willing to bet the Guardian $1 million and its editor's head that Manafort never met Assange." I'm also told by representatives close to Paul Manafort that they will soon put out a statement saying there was never any meeting between Paul Manafort and Julian Assange. As you can imagine, though, Harris, because he's in jail, he's not readily available by the telephone, so it's taking some time to get that statement together. Harris?
Subjects to talk about in this briefing. We'll see how much time we have with Sarah Sanders. As we see with some of these briefings, they end very quickly, and of course, in recent weeks, as you've noticed.
Well, again, their side, Manafort's side, is contending at WikiLeaks that there were never any meetings, let alone 3.
We've noticed the president hasn't really been abiding by the rules, but we'll see whether or not it's difficult for the press secretary to have to. Well, we were told in the last couple of weeks that you could ask a question.
You know, I don't expect it's going to be any different than it was in the past. You know, guidelines, schmidelines, I think what a lot of people here are thinking. And, you know, people will comport themselves in the way to which they have become accustomed, and we'll see how it goes.
We haven't really seen Sarah Sanders take a whole lot of questions from reporters outside of appearances on conservative media outlets, and so it'll be interesting to see just how they handles that rule book that she put in place when she comes out here, hopefully in a few moments. We also believe we're going to hear from the National Security Advisor, John Bolton. He may be taking some questions in advance of the president's trip down to Argentina for the G20 summit. Of course, a lot of questions for John Bolton in terms of...
There is, and I also think that we're probably going to hear a pre-briefing on the G20 from Larry Kudlow at the very least, the chief economic advisor, perhaps John Bolton as well on the national security side. So if that is the way that this unfolds, any questions about Mueller and DHS and tear gassing at the border will likely have to wait until after the top of the briefing. Thanks, Harris. Thank you. You bet.
The press briefing will begin at 1:20 p.m.
Yeah, that's like 25, 30.
Stay chatty, stay chatty.
No, I didn't do so. My sister came down from Canada. Last time I went was a year ago. It's one of the little finger piers. Ice making the foot. Yeah, you can put it behind. So we're maybe
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, you feel it's a pretty quick game. It's slow. Should just be money you have to go for those that are on cost. The travel needs to take so much. Is there any reason? Oh, I got to step it up. You can travel. You can get out there like this time is No, I have to because we had to book in I've been to her biggest I don't think Mr. Simulation. You're stuck here. Oh, there it is. Or we were just going to go around and close out. We flew, in New York. So we went New York, Nevola, Santiago, and then we went back to
It is not. Where I found that's great.
coming up to 30.
I'm going to see you just a few years today.
Oh, which has? Nice. So you're flying back Monday night? Wow. Yeah, that's very good. Yes. Well, until we get the next.
Until they say.
Until they push it to 3.
Begin at 1:25. So he graduates.
Oh, it's like his rights. You know, so you got to set up early to start. Early bird special. Yeah, I'm psyched. I'm actually around it.
Oh yeah, it's like it's a. Too much jocularity over there. Can you read?
Yeah, I'm just happy to see everybody together.
I'm after you.
I wish my wife could see that live. She doesn't. My folks have got that.
Christmas list. Give us a Christmas list. What do you want to allow? And it's like, what's the point? I mean, if there's something I want to put on a list, surprise me. It's like, you know, so I get a Christmas list, a Christmas list for the girls, I get a Christmas list for my wife. Sure. And if they had an awesome time, so I went to the early spot, give them, and like I said, my wife said the only thing that was private about it was, you know, they stayed at so I know to me, they have no idea. Of course, my wife is still there.
That's a nice family.
Yeah, that should make me regret it. I think I need to give my wife a spot. I know she hasn't. Yeah.
The Christmas at Hershey Hotel is that spot at Hershey's spot. It's an all day.
My daughter loves it. We actually went last Friday.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. My older one's 23. My new one's 25. We had our first we didn't get married. This is
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's at my house. But see, now that he's got the internet working, so it's nice. Play under control. Justin. No, you have to do Tuesday, Saturday. She should be here tomorrow.
Maybe.
It's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative. It's 120 somewhere.
So I went through
My granddaughter was the current granddaughter had it on. Triple box here, 3 box at the side, the bottom was sitting off like wall. Everyone else had. You must be sick. What is this getting?
Right. The lighting's are so bad. Yes.
What's that? Well, the thing is I mean, it's like these guys just, turn on their computer, yeah. I mean, you know what's on, what is that? These guys hear AirPods.
That's actually better. They tell us.
I know, well, it's the time. We have to stop.
It's interesting to see a correction coming.
Yeah. Well, this
Good afternoon. Later this week, the President and First Lady will travel to Argentina for the G20 summit. President Trump's participation in the G20 summit is a key opportunity to reiterate his commitment to domestic and global economic growth and prosperity, cement relations with other world leaders, and advance a global economic system that is based on fair economic competition and free, fair, and reciprocal trade. While at the G20, the President and the delegation will interact with many leaders, including bilateral meetings with the President of Argentina, the President of Russia, Prime Minister of Japan, and the Chancellor of Germany, and a working dinner with the President of China. To speak more about the G20 and what the President intends to accomplish, I'd like to welcome to the podium Director of National Economic Council Larry Kudlow, and following him, National Security Advisor Ambassador John Bolton. After the remarks, both will be available to take your questions on the G20 and other foreign policy news of the day, and then I'll be back up to take other questions on news of the day. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everybody. Let me just walk through some quick themes, and then I want to mention some things the President talked to us just a little while ago. As Sarah said, G20, funny, it's not actually the G20 when we count it up properly, as Ambassador Bolton points out. It's much more than the G20. Now, in terms of the U.S. positions, we're going to use this as an opportunity to talk about our measures of tax cuts and deregulations and reskilling and job training and so forth that have generated significant economic growth and prosperity. That includes women's economic empowerment. As Sarah mentioned, free, fair, and reciprocal trade and trade reform. There'll be discussions of infrastructure finance and also the U.S. emergence as the dominant energy power in the world today, actually. In terms of the much discussed meeting, it's going to be a dinner meeting between President Trump and President Xi and representatives from both sides. It'll be bilateral. I want to just mention what the President told us a short while ago, and that is, in his view, there's a good possibility that a deal can be made, and that he is open to that. He is open to that. But having said that, some caveats, as always. Certain conditions have to be met with respect to fairness and reciprocity, as we've said many times. For example, issues of intellectual property theft must be solved. Forced technology transfers must be solved. Significant tariffs and non-tariff barriers must be solved. Issues of ownership have to be solved. The President will probably reiterate his view. We want a world, ideally, of zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and zero subsidies. Now, whether they can get through all that remains to be seen, but that's the President's point of view, as I said just a little while ago. The U.S. is coming to the summit in very good shape. Our economy is quite strong. It's growing at 3% over the past year. Second quarter was 4.2, third quarter was 3.5, perhaps be revised upwards. We have a very strong holiday season, so-called Black Friday, very strong. We've had tremendous investments, business investments, energy investments, oil prices and gasoline prices coming down. That helps consumers, of course. We're in very good shape. China, not so good. I'm not here to critique or second-guess the Chinese economy, but most observers believe China to be in a slump, whereas the United States is in a very strong, solid position going into this summit. However, again, to repeat, the President said there's a good possibility that we can make a deal, and he is open to it. But on the other hand, if these conditions I mentioned a few moments ago are not met, not dealt with, the President has said, look, he's perfectly happy to stand on his tariff policies, which 10% last $200 billion, scheduled to go to 25%. That's not a certainty, but that's the schedule. And he has said, as recently as yesterday, the day before, if need be, if things don't work out in this U.S.-China summit meeting, he will invoke another 267 some odd billion dollars in tariffs. That may not be the first choice. I'm just saying that is his view. If we can't get something done, and things have been moving very slowly between the two countries, until the President himself called President Xi and said, let's restart, let's try to get things going again. And then since then, he's made positive comments about that. So we will see. As I said, the key U.S. goals is around growth and prosperity, and our economy is in good shape. Theirs is not. I'll just leave it right there. John, do you want to add stuff to that? Do you want me to take some questions? You sure? Okay, good. Let me take some questions and try to help out on this. Yes?
Mr. Pello, I'd like you to address some concerns recently from representatives of Italy and France and Germany who say that we're actually backing away from the national stage, and they fear that Russia will be the dominant economic force in Europe and the Middle East in the coming years. Could you address those concerns, A, and B, can you tell us a little bit, if you can, about the layoffs at GM?
Well, I'll talk to you about GM layoffs. Regarding the Russian story, I'm going to leave that to my longtime friend and colleague, John Bolton. I met with Mary Barra yesterday, and we had a lengthy conversation about the layoffs, the cause of the layoffs. It's a great disappointment, obviously. The President indicated his own disappointment. He believes, as frankly the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, believes, that the USMCA deal was a great help to the automobile industry and to auto workers. And by the way, they made those statements separately. And yet, GM comes in right after the deal. By the way, that deal will be signed in Argentina with the U.S. And Canadian representatives. So there's great disappointment there. There's disappointment that it seems like GM would rather build its electric cars in China rather than in the United States. We are going to be looking at certain subsidies regarding electric cars and others, whether they should apply or not. I can't say anything final about that, but we're looking into it. Again, that reflects the president's own disappointment regarding these actions. Ms. Barrett told me, on the other hand, I want to be completely fair here, it's her business, it may be possible to transfer workers to other plants in Texas and Michigan. I'm not an expert on General Motors, I'm not an analyst, auto analyst, but that's what she said. But obviously there's a lot of disappointment, even anger. I've heard it, again, from Mr. Trudeau, from President Trump, from Democrats and Republicans.
Just to follow, do you think it's going to adversely affect our economy coming into the Christmas season and after?
No, I mean, look, I don't want anybody to get laid off. I want workers to do very well. I want worker wages to do well, and they are. I mean, that's one of the great things. You know, there's a certain amount of pessimism that I'm reading about. Maybe it has to do with really a mild stock market correction. Let's not forget a couple weeks ago, just on this very point, we had 250,000 new jobs, which was a blockbuster number. Nobody really expected it. With a 3.1% yearly gain in wages and a 3.7% unemployment rate, those are very spiffy numbers by any benchmark in any metric. So again, holiday season layoffs from GM, brutal, all right? Very disappointing. Will it affect the overall economy? I don't think so. I do not think so. Yes?
Yeah, back to the question of the tariffs. And if these talks with President Xi go nowhere, and we move forward with this escalation of the tariffs that you just described, which, correct me if I'm wrong, would be the biggest addition of tariffs that we've seen in your lifetime, what will the impact be on the U.S. economy? I mean,
that's a long period of time you mentioned. My lifetime.
But you've been a committed free trader for almost all of those years.
Yes.
So what will be the impact on the U.S. economy if we see tariffs go up to the degree that you just described?
You know, we'll see what happens, okay? I don't want to presuppose anything. The president's going to make up his mind after the meeting. But I will say this. Our economy is in very good shape right now. And when you multiply through whatever numbers you want to use, 250 billion or tack on another tranche, which may or may not happen, at a 10% tariff rate or more, it's really just a fraction of our economy. Okay, it's just a fraction of our economy. I'm not suggesting that there aren't winners and losers in that game. It's a complicated game. But on the other hand, I think we are in far better shape to weather this than the Chinese are. And I'll also say one thing. I appreciate your characterization. I am a free trader. But you have to ask yourself, this is what President Trump has been talking about, is it free trade when there's clear evidence of unfair and WTO illegal trading practices by China for several decades? Is that fair? Is that free? Is it free when intellectual property theft occurs, or when Chinese ownership of American companies force transference of technology from American companies to the Chinese companies? Is that fair? Or high tariffs on agriculture and industrial supplies? Is that fair? So President Trump is the first president in, I don't know, at least 20 years, and I'm including Democrats and Republicans, who not only has made this case, but continues to make this case forcefully and to take actions to defend American workers and our overall economy. Other presidents in both parties have raised the issue and then walked away from it. And President Trump obviously doesn't intend to. You know, this is under the heading, I think, for him of promises made, promises kept. It's something he's talked about for several years, and he now continues. If China will come to the table, or in this case, the dinner table, with some new ideas and some new attitudes and some new cooperation, as the president said, there's a good possibility they can make a deal. He's open to it. So nothing is written in cement or stone. But again, for a free trader, where's the free trade? And for several months now, since I've been here, President and I have talked about this. We'd love to see a world of zero tariffs and zero non-tariff barriers and zero subsidies. We'd love to see that world. But unfortunately, we don't have that world, particularly with respect to China, but not only China. And so he's taking actions that he thinks will get us closer to that world. Let me go around. Yes, please.
Thanks. Just another GM question. When the president said yesterday they better damn well open a new plant there very quickly, was he just venting his frustration, or does he have some consequences in mind if they don't?
I'm going to leave that to him. You may find additional announcements coming on that topic. Some more. Let me go in the back. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask you about what Ambassador Shui Tiankai said recently to the
Who?
Wall Street Journal. Ambassador Shui Tiankai, the Chinese ambassador
Yes.
To the United States. His thought was that there would be a real risk to the global markets if there wasn't a deal, that they could become fragmented as well. How big are the stakes if you can't reach a deal?
Look, the ambassador makes a point. Now, if he would do his part, or his government would do their part, then we can all make a much better point. That's what President Trump is saying. I mean, I'll read you the quote again. There's a good possibility we can make a deal, and he's open to it. But certain conditions, have to be met. Certain things have to be changed. And the president, again, in the spirit of promises made, promises kept, is going to defend, the interests of American workers and ranchers and small businesses and the economy writ large. Let me just add one other point to this. The rest of the world agrees with us. I mean, we signed at the UN, for example, the trilateral agreement with the EU, the United States, and Japan. Worth looking at that document, which outlines, what they call non-market abuses, read China. Just recently, before the Shanghai conference, where President Xi was to give an important speech, I'm not sure there was much new there, but in any case, just before that conference, with no prodding from the USA, the ambassadors, the French and German ambassadors to China, wrote a very tough piece going after, again, non-market, unfair, non-reciprocal trading practices. There is broad-based support for the American position here, which is China should change its practices and come into the community of responsible trading nations. They can do that, right? They're a major economy right now. It's not like they were 25 or 30 years ago. We would welcome it. The president has said he's happy to make a deal, but they have to take certain actions and give certain assurances. So,
You'll spend the G20 getting that support around your position from other countries at the G20?
I'm sure we will. We have in many other forms. Just a couple more. I want Ambassador. Yes, please.
Mr. Kudlow. Thank you. Yes, he was talking to me. Tariffs are, in effect, a tax on imported products that are paid for by the consumer. So does the president realize that these escalated tariffs are going to be paid for by the American citizens?
Well, look, he realizes the ramifications. As I said earlier, given the strength of our economy, given the size of our economy, we are in position to deal with this and handle this very well. That's the key point. And I'm not so sure about China, but I'll leave that to China experts and so forth and so on. The benefits, let me just look at the other side of the ledger. It's very important. The benefits of true free trade globally will be enormous. If we go back to the idea of zero tariffs and zero non-tariff barriers and zero subsidies, if China plays by the rules, even the WTO rules, and all that needs reforming in our judgment, but they're violating those rules. if we do have a free trading system, or we move in the direction of a free trading system, a true free trading system, we will benefit enormously. Frankly, we will benefit, they will benefit, and the rest of the world will benefit. Now, free trade throws off enormous benefits when it's done properly in consistency and in a reciprocal manner. That's the key point the President emphasized. He's absolutely right. So, you know, I think of it as possibly a long rainbow here. At the end of that rainbow is a pot of gold. You open up that pot and you have prosperity for the rest of the world. But you got to get through that long rainbow. We're not there yet. We can get there. The President is reaching out. But we'll see how that works.
Sir.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Earlier, you mentioned low oil and gas prices as evidence that the president's economic policy is working. You mentioned the U.S. becoming the global dominant energy player. But merely days ago, the president said that it was necessary to let Saudi Arabia and its crown prince get away with ordering the murder of a Washington Post journalist because Saudi Arabia ensures low gas prices. Now, which one is it, sir?
I'm going to let Ambassador Bolton handle that question. I'm trying so hard to swim in my own lane, and I think John will help out with that whole discussion. He's sitting there much too calmly and quietly, so I want to get him up here. We've known each other a very long time. You're on, John.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I don't really have much to add. Sarah gave you the list of bilaterals. Let me just update it a little bit because we're trying to fill every minute of the president's schedule. She said he's going to meet with President Macri, the host government of Argentina. He'll meet with President Moon of South Korea. He'll meet with President Erdogan of Turkey, Prime Minister Abe of Japan. That will transform at some point during that meeting into a trilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. And then, as Sarah said, the president will meet with President Putin and have a working dinner with President Xi.
There were two questions that were...
Sir, Ambassador.
Sir?
Yeah, right here.
Thank you, sir. Does the president have any plans in the works to meet with the Saudi crown prince while he's there?
No, look, the bilateral schedule is full to overflowing at this point, and so those are the ones I've listed that he'll be meeting with. Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Mr.
Yes, I have a question about the border tensions right now with the U.S. and Mexico. The U.S. launched tear gas canisters into Mexican soil, and I'm wondering if you've gotten if Mexico was given the go-ahead before that happened, and what is the U.S. doing to mitigate any tensions right now with the incoming López Obrador administration?
Yeah, I don't think that's really a subject of the G20, but I can say that Secretary of State Pompeo, who will be attending the G20 and therefore will not be accompanying Vice President Pence to the inauguration on Saturday the 1st, Secretary Pompeo will fly overnight from Argentina to Mexico and will meet with the new foreign minister of Mexico on Sunday the 2nd. And they'll have a full conversation about all the issues in connection with the border. Yeah.
What do you expect to be on the agenda for the president's meeting with Putin?
Well, I think all of the issues that we have on security issues, on arms control issues, on regional issues, including the Middle East, I think it'll be a full agenda. I think it'll be a continuation of their discussion in Helsinki.
What about Ukraine?
Sure.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Two questions about Brazil, since you are heading there on Thursday to meet with the new incoming president from Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro. One on trade that I know is one of the priorities. For the past few years, Brazil had a trade surplus with Brazil.
United States had a trade surplus.
Just last year, 27 billion alone. And besides of that, President Trump complained about the Brazilian protectionism, say Brazil is one of the toughest on trade access. What should we expect related to trade relationship with Brazil, with the new Brazilian government, should we expect more cooperation or more tariffs like those on steel and aluminum? And another one on Venezuela that I know is another priority of the meeting. What kind of cooperation are you expecting with the new Brazilian government? Are you guys going to discuss sanctions?
Yeah. Well, the meeting with President-elect Bolsonaro came as a result of President Trump's call on election night in Brazil to congratulate President-elect Bolsonaro. They had a really outstanding phone call, I think developed a personal relationship even remotely. President Trump was the first foreign leader to call President-elect Bolsonaro. So following up on this, we thought it would be useful and certainly very helpful to the United States to hear from the President-elect what his priorities are, what he's looking for in the relationship. From the perspective of the United States, we see this as a historic opportunity for Brazil and the United States to work together in a whole host of areas, economics, security, and a range of others. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what the President-elect's priorities are, try and respond to him, try and tell him a little bit about what President Trump's views are, and hopefully when President-elect Bolsonaro is inaugurated on January the 1st, that the two leaders can really get off to a running start. So I'm just really there to prepare the ground for them.
Ambassador Bolton, you tweeted earlier today about a case involving an American family that's being held in China. Have you talked to the president about this case? What is he, if so, what has he told you? And will he bring this up directly at his meeting with Xi Jinping and expect the family to be allowed to leave before any trade deal is done?
Well, I've discussed the question of American hostages and people wrongfully held with him on a whole range of subjects. I don't want to get into what his reaction was because I don't think those conversations should be public. But this is a matter of real concern to us, and I think given that the range of issues that President Xi and President Trump will be covering, it's entirely possible that that would come up. Yeah.
Thank you. Back to that meeting with President Putin and President Trump. Will President Trump condemn Russia's aggression in Ukraine? Does the U.S. consider it an act of war? And has he spoken with either Putin or Poroshenko about what happened?
Look, Ambassador Haley, in the very estimable position of UN ambassador, spoke for the United States yesterday at the Security Council, and we're going to stand on that statement.
Ambassador Bolton, I just had a question about, you mentioned the bilat with the Turkish leader. They've been very critical of the U.S. position back in Saudi Arabia with respect to the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Are you concerned that that will affect the relations with the U.S. ally? And wanted to follow up that audio intelligence of the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Have you heard that tape? And does it conclusively point to the Crown Prince as ordering the killing of Jamal Khashoggi? And one final one. The briefing.
Supposed to remember all these?
I'll prompt you.
Thank you.
And finally, is it true the White House is blocking Gina Haspel from speaking to senators about that audio intelligence on Wednesday?
So let me take the question of the tape first. No, I haven't listened to it. And I guess I should ask you, why do you think I should? What do you think I'll learn from it?
Well, you're the National Security Advisor. You might have access to that sort of intelligence.
Yeah. How many in this room speak Arabic?
You have access to an interpreter?
Well, you want me to listen to it? What am I going to learn from? I mean, if they were speaking Korean, I wouldn't learn any more from it either.
The interpreter would be able to tell you what's
Well,
going on.
then I can read a transcript too.
So you don't think it's important to hear that as the National Security Advisor?
I'm just trying to make the point that everybody who says, why don't you listen to the tape, unless you speak Arabic, what are you going to get from it?
The president?
Really? The president has spoken to our position on this issue. He's spoken very clearly, and that is our position. Now tell me the other questions.
Gina Haspel from
No, certainly
sharing
not.
information with members
Certainly
of Congress.
No, back here in the back.
Mr. Bolton, could you go back to
The man in the back.
Okay, so the Argentinian authority captured 2 Hezbollah suspects last week, and Brazil probably is going to follow the American footsteps and blacklist Hezbollah also on terrorist list. And also Hezbollah is replying for the sanctions, the last sanctions, by blocking the formation of the new government. It's a quotation from Saad al-Hariri. So how will you put all this together? Is it going to be discussed in the G20 summit, Iran and Hezbollah influence in the region?
Well, I expect in the bilateral meetings, depending on the country, that there will be substantial conversation about counterterrorism efforts where we participate together. That's certainly something that may well come up in Brazil with President-elect Bolsonaro, and I think it's one of President Trump's biggest priorities to extend cooperation against terrorism, whether it's Hezbollah or Hamas or others. So entirely likely it could be a subject. Yes, ma'am.
Ambassador, going back to the Khashoggi issue, being informed about an issue is part of, I guess, what is in the scope of national security.
We try to do.
Right, okay. But in the midst of it, why not, I'm going to go back to that question again, sir. Why not get a translator to understand, to hear what happened? You could find out a little bit more than what they've told you by listening.
People who speak Arabic have listened to the tape, and they have given us the substance of what's in it.
And you trust those who've given you...
I don't speak Arabic.
I know, but a translator, you could hear the emotion, and a translator could help you understand what happened at that time to relate to the President of the United States and to convey to the world what happened.
I'm very satisfied that we know what the tape picked up, and it was factored into the President's decision, and he's announced his position very clearly.
Mr. Ambassador, as economic security, as national security, I think this should be in your lane.
I was going to defer to Larry, but it's...
Let me see if I can keep it in your lane if I could. The talks with China have been marked with intransigence and disappointment. Larry was talking about that at length this morning. This idea of some sense of optimism going into this Saturday night dinner with Xi, is it based on any notion that Xi is going to suddenly say, you know, this idea of intellectual property theft and forced technology transfer, protectionist tariffs? I don't know what we were thinking. It was a bad idea. Let's level the playing field and start anew.
Well, I think President Trump has developed a very positive relationship with President Xi. They've met, they've spoken over the phone. Obviously, both leaders carry into any discussion like this their national interest. And I think it's instructive, and I think the Chinese side believes the same thing, to have the two leaders exchange their views in the presence of their senior advisors, and not with the expectation that at this meeting there'll be some substantial agreement coming out of it, but that there would be an indication, a kind of way ahead that the advisors could then pursue. And I see Sarah is so eager to be here to answer your questions.
I was going to give him one more, but...
Mr. Cudlow deferred a question to him. Could he answer the question that was deferred to him, please? Mr. Bolton. Bolton.
I think he's already gone. As you know, the new president of Mexico will be inaugurated on Saturday to represent the United States in Mexico City. President Trump has asked the Vice President, Mike Pence, to lead a delegation that will include the Second Lady of the United States, Karen Pence, Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry, Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, Advisor to the President, Ivanka Trump, United States Embassy Mexico City diplomat John Kramer, and Assistant Secretary of State Kimberly Breyer. Lastly, this morning we learned the sad news that 3 U.S. service members were killed and 3 wounded when an explosive device detonated in Afghanistan. The wounded service members were evacuated and are receiving medical care. We extend our thoughts and prayers to the loved ones of those killed and to those recovering. The United States is grateful for their service and forever in debt of their sacrifice. With that, I'll take your questions. Justin.
Sarah, The Guardian's reporting today that Paul Manafort met with Julian Assange around the time that he was coming on board to the Trump campaign. Wondering if you know if that meeting took place and if you remain confident in the White House's repeated denials that no campaign officials were involved in discussions about the plans to release John Podesta's emails.
Certainly remain confident in the White House's assertion that the president was involved in no wrongdoing, was not part of any collusion. The things that have to do with Mr. Manafort, I would refer you to his attorneys to address that.
Sarah, given that the president said this morning that Robert Mueller is ruining people's lives, is he considering a pardon for Paul Manafort or for others who were prosecuted, have been prosecuted?
I'm not aware of any conversations for anyone's pardon involving this process at all.
And if I can follow up, he also said this morning that Mueller is doing tremendous damage to the criminal justice system. If that's true, is he considering picking up the phone, calling his acting attorney general, and saying fire Robert Mueller?
Look, I think that the president has had Robert Mueller doing his job for the last 2 years, and he could have taken action at any point, and he hasn't. So we'll let that speak for itself. He has no intent to do anything. See?
Thanks, Sarah. Over the weekend, we saw some powerful images of children as well as adults who were affected by tear gas fired by U.S. officers along the U.S.-Mexico border. We've heard the president talk about that at length yesterday, but one thing we did not hear from him was any expression really of regret that there were children caught up in this. So I was wondering, does the White House regret the fact that children were affected by tear gas and that this situation took place, and is there an investigation underway to prevent this from happening again?
Certainly, the White House would never want children to be in harm's way in any capacity whatsoever. However, that is why we are continuing to encourage people to follow the law and go to ports of entry. Law enforcement officials have used appropriate non-lethal force to protect themselves and prevent an illegal rush across the border. And let's also not forget that this isn't the first time that non-lethal force like this has been used. In fact, tear gas was used on average once a month during the Obama administration for very similar circumstances. In fact, they were actually for far less circumstances because they didn't have the same numbers in the mass rush that we're seeing in this caravan take place. Certainly no one wants women or children or any individuals to have this happen, which is why we've encouraged them to actually follow the law and go to ports of entry.
John, I just follow up real quick on something that Ambassador Bolton mentioned when he ruled out a bilateral between the president and MBS. Is the White House ruling out any interaction between the president and the Saudi crown prince in this case in the equivalent of diplomatic timeout?
I wouldn't say that we've ruled out any interaction. I know that the president's schedule is pretty packed and has a number of sessions that he'll be involved in with the G20 as well as a number of bilats. I don't think there's any time for us to add anything additional, whether or not there's some interaction. I'm not going to rule that out, and we'll keep you guys posted as that happens tomorrow.
Thanks, Sarah. Yesterday in Mississippi at his rally, the president said, he asked a question about Mike Espy. He said, how does he fit in with Mississippi? I mean, how does he fit in? I guess suggesting that he doesn't fit in. I mean, Mike Espy's great-grandparents were slaves in Mississippi. What did the president mean by that?
Due to the fact that that is an election that is taking place today, I'm not going to comment on anything that could affect anything taking place in Mississippi, and certainly happy to comment on that after today. John,
Thanks a lot,
the
Sarah.
president's not guided by the Hatch Act. John, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Does the administration have a position on the government of Ecuador continuing to provide asylum to Julian Assange at its embassy in London?
I'm not aware of anything official. I'd have to get back to you.
And just one more on that, if I may, Sarah. Will you, from the podium, call on the Ecuadorian government to confirm whether or not some sort of meeting may have taken place between Paul Manafort and Julian Assange at its embassy?
Certainly, we encourage the process to continue to play out, but I'm not going to get engaged in specifics of that case.
President Trump has implied that a potential new deal with Mexico is a done deal, tweeting that migrants will stay in Mexico as they wait for their cases of asylum to be processed. How far along are talks with the new Mexican administration about the so-called Remain in Mexico policy?
Those conversations continue. We won't have a final decision until the new government actually takes over, which will happen on Saturday. And on Monday, we expect the new foreign minister from Mexico to meet and sit down with White House administration officials and the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen and continue and try to finalize those conversations.
Second question on Khashoggi, because tomorrow Secretaries Pompeo and Mattis will brief the full Senate on the murder. Why is a leader of a U.S. intelligence agency not joining them, specifically Gina Haspel, who many senators expect to hear from?
Ambassador Bolton addressed this. I'm not going to comment on behalf of the CI director in that capacity. That's something I would direct you to them to answer.
Sarah, I want to ask you about the climate assessment that your administration released last week. The president yesterday, when asked about the economic forecast, he essentially said he didn't believe it. The takeaway for many people is that the president doesn't feel necessarily a responsibility to lead either in this country or in the world on climate change and preventing the calamity that your administration forecasts. Do you agree with that view? And if not, why not?
The president's certainly leading on what matters most in this process, and that's on having clean air, clean water. In fact, the United States continues to be a leader on that front. Even Obama's Undersecretary for Science didn't believe the radical conclusions of the report that was released. And you have to look at the fact that this report is based on the most extreme modeled scenario, which contradicts long-established trends. Modeling the climate is an extremely complicated science that is never exact. The biggest thing that we can do is focus on how to make sure we have the cleanest air, the cleanest water, and the president is certainly doing that and certainly leading on that front.
How is he doing that? I mean, the president's about to go to Buenos Aires and meet with all the leaders of the world's industrialized nations and developing nations as well. Isn't this a great opportunity for him to sit at the table and say, folks, this is what my administration just reported. This is the time that we all have to act in concert to prevent what my administration is forecasting?
Once again, we think that this is the most extreme version, and it's not based on facts. It's not data driven. We'd like to see something that is more data driven. It's based on modeling, which is extremely hard to do when you're talking about the climate. Again, our focus is on making sure we have the safest, cleanest air and water, and the president's going to do exactly that. April.
Sarah, I want to go back to GM. President Trump, early on in January 2017, met with the big three automakers, and he said he wanted to make the U.S. a more attractive place for companies to manufacture products by lowering taxes and business regulations. What does this move, this action by GM say?
Certainly, it's disappointing to see that GM decided to lay off these workers. The president's been extremely committed to bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States, which is why since he took office, we've seen 400,000 new manufacturing jobs created in the United States. It's because of his policies that we've seen that grow. This is not about the president. It's about the fact that they're making a car, frankly, that people don't want to buy. And hopefully they will make adjustments and make changes and bring those workers back. Jim?
Sarah, getting back to Paul Manafort and the special counsel's office saying that he's violating the terms of this plea agreement by lying to investigators, would the president recommend that Mr. Manafort begin to cooperate, offer full cooperation to the special counsel's office?
We can only speak to what our role is in that process, and not only has the president, but the entire administration has been fully cooperative with the special counsel's office, providing hours and hours of sit-downs, as well as over 4 million pages in documents. We continue to be cooperative, but we also know that there was no collusion, and we're ready for this to wrap up.
And if I could ask a follow-up, the president doesn't believe the warnings in the climate report. The president doesn't believe the CIA when it comes to Jamal Khashoggi. The president doesn't believe the intelligence community when it comes to Russia meddling. Why doesn't he have faith in his advisors?
That's not true. The president has a great deal of faith in the intelligence community and certainly in the team that he has assembled around him. However, I've addressed the climate report. There's really nothing else to add on that front.
Khashoggi, you said that that was not true, that he doesn't believe the CIA. He said the other day, maybe MBS did, maybe he didn't, the Crown Prince.
And we haven't seen definitive evidence come from our intelligence community that ties him directly to that. What we have seen is a number of individuals that we know are tied to that, and those individuals have been sanctioned. The people that we have no doubt about their involvement, we've taken action on. And as he said, we'll see what happens beyond that, and if there's more definitive information, we'll make a decision at that point. Roberta.
Sarah, the Remain in Mexico meeting that you talked about on Monday, is that happening here or in Mexico? And is the United States offering Mexico any financial assistance to help accommodate the migrants seeking asylum who would be staying in Mexico as a result?
Sorry, on that second question, do you mind repeating that? It was the first part on whether or not the meeting is here or in Mexico. I'll get back to you on that. I'm not sure on the exact location.
Okay. Is the United States offering Mexico any financial assistance or does the United States plan to accommodate the migrants who would be staying in Mexico?
I'm not aware of any financial assistance, but certainly we'll keep you posted if I get that.
Just to clean up on the bilats, you mentioned in your list a bilat with the Chancellor of Germany, but the ambassador did not. Has that bilat been canceled?
No, it hasn't. I think he was just given additional updates on the ones that I didn't mention. John?
So the president tweeted at length yesterday about the Mueller report, asking if it's going to show both sides. What are his concerns about any forthcoming Mueller report? And is that report is supposed to be delivered to no one else but the Attorney General? Is he concerned that it is going to become public without his knowledge?
I don't think the president has any concerns about the report because he knows that there was no wrongdoing by him and that there was no collusion. So I don't think he has concern on that front.
If he has no concerns, why is he tweeting so vociferously about it?
Certainly the president has voiced his unhappiness from the beginning that this has gone on, this ridiculous witch hunt for more than 2 years. Still nothing that ties anything to the president. We'd like to see it come to a conclusion. Peter.
Thank you, Sarah. Does the president believe that the work of the special prosecutor, Bob Mueller, is illegitimate?
I'm sorry?
Does the president believe that the prosecution's indictments of Bob Mueller are illegitimate?
I think the president believes that what I've said several times today and several times over the last couple of years, that there was no wrongdoing on his part, there was no collusion by his campaign, and beyond that, that's really all we can speak about here at the White House. Last question, Howard.
Thank you. 2 questions for you. The president, as you're speaking, is tweeting that he is going to be considering cutting all GM subsidies, including for electric cars. Can you explain why he says that he thinks that would help American workers? Can you explain why that wouldn't end up backfiring, as we've already seen, and who the president has consulted and what the timeline is for this decision?
I don't know that there's a specific timeline. As he said, he's looking into what those options might look like. The president wants to see American companies build cars here in America, not build them overseas, and he is hopeful that GM will continue to do that here. Second question
for you is on Afghanistan. The president on Thanksgiving Day told U.S. troops that we are winning the war in Afghanistan, which contradicted what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, that it was a stalemate. Does the president today still believe, after what we saw over the weekend, that we are winning in Afghanistan, and why?
Certainly, anytime you have a loss of life, particularly by an American service member, it is a horrific tragedy and something that no president wants to see, certainly not during their administration. And the president wants to make sure that the battle that we're fighting takes place there and not here. And he's going to continue consulting with his national security team and make decisions on how best to move forward beyond that. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Did you all violate the Posse Comitatus Act in Mexico? Sarah?
All right, there it is, the latest White House press briefing with Sarah Sanders. That is the latest one since the White House's attempt to ban Jim Acosta, who you saw there, asked some of the final questions in this briefing. And so that will wrap up our stream today. Yep. Thank you all for joining us here on YouTube or if you're on our website, fox5dc.com. Join us again tomorrow for more live video, live streams, anything we got coming in, both in DC and around the nation here on Fox 5 Live. We'll catch you then.